Welcome to episode 513 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Meyers, screenwriter and blogger at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I am interviewing writer and director and actor Matthew Yerby. He is a Southern filmmaker from Louisiana, and he has a great story about how he got started locally as an actor and just started networking and meeting people and moving up. He eventually moved to New Orleans, where he started getting bigger roles and started to put some of his own projects together. If you live outside of Los Angeles and are trying to get your career going, Matthew has a lot of great advice on how you can find local opportunities and make the most out of them. So stay tuned for that interview. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking or sharing it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog and the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode 513. If you want my free guide, How to Sell a Screenplay in 5 Weeks, you can pick that up by going to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. It's completely free. You just put in your email address and I'll send you a new lesson once per week for 5 weeks, along with a bunch of bonus lessons. I teach the whole process of how to sell your screenplay in that guide. I'll teach you how to write a professional logline and career letter and how to find agents, managers, and producers who are looking for material. Really is everything you need to know to sell your screenplay. Just go to sellingyourscreenplay.com/guide. So now let's get into the main segment. Today I'm interviewing writer, director, and actor Matthew Yerby. Here is the interview. Welcome, Matthew, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. Really appreciate you coming on the show with me today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me.
So to start out, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get interested in the entertainment business?
Absolutely. I actually grew up in small town, North Louisiana. I graduated high school from a town called Winfield. I played college baseball at a Division I school right down the roads called Northwestern State University. It's in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and that's kind of where I've always considered home. But shortly after that, I made a move out of there to pursue an acting career. First moved to Shreveport, and at the time that I was going to acting classes and auditioning as much as I could for short films and, whatever feature was coming through Louisiana at the time. I also started writing. I was so poor that I could not pay for coverage. And so I bartered. I was a yoga instructor and I bartered with who is now my mentor. She's an editor in the industry, and we bartered. I would teach her yoga and she would help critique my screenplays. I continued the acting journey down to New Orleans. And with my mentor, I actually helped her produce a film. And once I did that, I knew I wanted to be behind the camera for good. I just kept writing and writing. And I finished 12 feature-length plays before one of them became a movie. And that was The Dirty South.
Gotcha. So let me just touch on a couple things you just mentioned. I know this podcast, we have people all over the world, much less people here in small town USA. Maybe you can talk about that transition. Like, why didn't you just bump from your small town? You went to Shreveport, New Orleans. Why not just come out to Los Angeles? And maybe you can give us some tips there. Like, if you're in a small town like that, it's a big fish in a small pond. But how do you find opportunities outside of Hollywood? How do you find those opportunities to meet your mentor, to get these acting gigs?
Well, first thing, as far as for an actor, like the first place you're going to get your foot in the door is with short films. Short films, they are ready to cast all kinds of actors, whether they're experienced or non-experienced. So I knew that in Shreveport, Louisiana, that was going to be a much easier stepping stone than for me leaving Natchitoches, which is a population of 20,000, and going to Los Angeles. So I went to Shreveport first. I learned under a very good coach. And when I felt like I wasn't getting enough auditions, I moved to New Orleans. And that's where I found an agent. And I started auditioning regularly. And I started writing more. I just wrote more. I worked more with my mentor. And New Orleans was the first time I really got to step on big sets and actually to understand, just how how films go, how movies are made and how long you have to be there on set, all the things that I learned. And,
How did you find your local community? Like, how do you find a community in New Orleans? I mean, in LA, you just go to a coffee shop and you're likely to bump into someone that's writing a screenplay. But in New Orleans, how do you just get piped into these? Are there trade magazines that you can look at to see what productions are coming to town? Just doing local theater, you network with those people. Just how did you actually get into the local scene?
It's actually that's a great question because I booked a short film when I was in Shreveport. I think I was 24 years old, and another actor on the set was a guy named Andrew Vogel, and we became friends. He was in New Orleans, and I told him that I was looking to move to New Orleans, and he said, "Hey man, I need a roommate." So I packed my stuff up and moved down there. 10 years later, Andrew Vogel was just an actor in the Dirty South as well as produced the film. So you'd be surprised like who you meet on short films. We always throw the short film and just think it's like, oh, it's not going to do anything. You meet a lot of your team right there in your very beginning, like your humble beginnings.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you get that first short film? I mean, in LA, I think a lot of those short films are on places like Craigslist. You can find people casting short films. There's the breakdown services here in LA for actors. But in some of these small towns, how do actors get those roles? How did you even find this short film?
I want to say this was a Craigslist. I think I found this just the calling the audition on Craigslist. It was still back when we were doing like in-person auditioning. So I went to this house, auditioned for them, and I actually got that was the way that it starts. I do remember looking a lot of things on Facebook. Facebook will actually tell you a lot of casting calls. If you will look in the area that you're at, if you'll, say if you're in Shreveport, Louisiana, if you'll just type in Shreveport, Louisiana film and television, Facebook, I got all of these groups that popped up to me. So I joined them and I just started looking at what people were writing and seeing what they needed.
Yeah, smart. Okay, so take us through your journey. It sounds like throughout this entire process, you're writing screenplays. So The Dirty South was about what you say 10th or 11th screenplay, and then take us through that journey. How did you start to get that produced? How did you get some financing in place?
Well, one of the things, like I really attracted the attention of two producers, one being Andrew Vogel, the other Suzanne Tony, and both of them really, really enjoyed the script. And they said, we're going to help you make this no matter what, no matter how long it takes. And that's exactly what they did. This took 4 years for us to get, and believe me, like the casting process was very, very difficult because when you see a first time writer, a lot of these big actors are not going to take that chance. So the casting process took 4 years, and through that process, I probably went with over 50 to 75 rewrites just to keep building the story, to attract that actor. And we finally landed on our cast.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's dig into this. To start out, maybe you can give us a quick picture logline. What is The Dirty South all about?
The Dirty South is a small town crime drama, and this is where in any town there's really no small town, especially there's no middle class. In the South, we have the upper class and we have the lower class. And The Dirty South is about a family that will do anything that it takes to actually protect one another. And it's the fight against rich against poor, and it's about my lead character, Sue, getting $30,000 in 3 days' time, or she's going to lose her house and her family business to the big wigs of the town.
And where did this idea come from? What was sort of the genesis of this story?
My mentor also told me to write what I can produce and write what I know. Well, I'm from this area, so I know these characters very, very much. So I've been on both sides of that track, and I know how much you have to claw and scrape and scratch until you have anything. But the log line it's just a small town bartender must get 30 grand in 3 days, or she's going to lose her family business, and she'll do anything in the entire world.
Now you mentioned that you needed to kind of use what you had. You knew these characters, you're from this area. Just from a practical production standpoint, did you have access to a bar? Like, were there some production elements that you also knew you had going into writing this? So you wrote this around some of the actual physical things that you might have had in place. Maybe you can speak to that a little bit.
Every location, not just the bar. The bar is actually where I worked at in college, but that was part of me writing what I could produce. I wrote only locations that I knew that I could get for free. We got every location for free. We got boats for free, every truck for free, all the tractors and equipment and anything that we could ask for. I knew that this was I could produce this myself, or it was a one phone call away.
Gotcha. So let's talk about your writing process specifically. When do you typically write? Do you write in the mornings, nights, middle of the day? And where do you typically write? Are you that home office guy? Do you need to go to Starbucks with that ambient noise? What does your just sort of writing routine look like?
My writing starts in the morning. I usually start around 6:30 in the morning, and I will write till around 8:30 or 9, just depending on how well it's flowing. But I always write at home. I usually use my balcony. I live in Venice Beach, California, and so I will walk out on my balcony and take my computer open, have my coffee, and I'll go until I can't go anymore.
Gotcha. So how much time do you spend preparing to write outline, index cards versus how much time are you in final draft actually cranking out script pages?
I actually think that the outline does take just as long, if not longer. I just use the structure, and I always like this past script. I did learn that it's better for you to see it. So I have been putting it up on the wall. Each scene is a postcard, and each one is labeled either blue for, this is where my lead character loses this scene, or it's red where he wins the scene. And so I can see the flow of the script, but for the colors, it's like you don't want 3 blue scenes in a row because they will be just sad. But So after the outlining is done, then I create my characters, and I create characters by typing a one full page, single spaced, and I won't stop until I fill the entire page up. And it is everything about this character. And I will do this with my 3 to 4 lead characters, and I won't stop until I fill the entire page up, because once I've done that, I know everything about them. And when I sit down to start writing, they start talking for me.
And so you just imagine like where they grew up, siblings, grandparents, socioeconomic, all that stuff is in this one page.
All in the one page. Everything about them, what they're good at, what their flaw is, what the thing that drives them crazy, the thing that will bring them joy. I create them fully as 3-dimensional human beings, because we all have the good side and the bad side. And if they are a bad character, I explained why they became bad. If they're a good character, I explained why they're on this path and how much they've overcame to be on this path. And
how much changes as you start writing the script? How much do you ever have to go back and say, you know what, this character is not actually working in this particular situation. I need a different character. How much changes of these character bios as you're writing the script?
Normally, I stick pretty true to them. There has been times, especially on the most recent project, The Dirty South, I thought it was easier to combine 2 characters into one, because I realized they were talking almost the exact same. They had pretty much the same dialogue, and I realized that this is going to be more powerful coming from one person, and it's more resourceful as well.
Gotcha. So let's talk about your development process a little bit. Once you had a draft that you like, it sounds like you have this other producers you were working with, but what does that development process looks like? You had a draft, you sent it to them. Did you send it to some actors? Did you get notes? And then how do you interpret those notes?
Well, I always send it out to at least 5 people each time. And I have a list of 5. 2 of them are writers, 2 are actors, 1 is my mentor. And each time I will send it out, I will receive all of their feedback, and I'll have all of their feedback printed out right in front of me, 5 different things, and I will see which points match on every one of them. If it's across the board, or even 3 or 4, if it's 3 people say this thing, it's like, that's a note. And I look from it across the board, but I always take I actually look forward to the first critique, because that's where the story really starts to get way better, is on the second draft. First draft's about getting it out of your heads, getting it out of your head and on paper. On the second draft, you really get to see some people, if they were sitting in the audience, it's like, this is what they actually would think could make this story better. And when you start bringing more brains into it and more, creativity, the story always gets better.
You mentioned that you estimated you might have done 75 drafts of this movie just to accommodate actors and stuff. Maybe you can talk about that a little bit. Do you ever get notes, or do you ever find yourself accommodating an actor, and maybe, it's not necessarily what you would do story wise, but man, you really want this actor, or, you're not completely in agreement with this person's notes. Maybe you can just speak to that a little bit. How do you kind of work through some of those issues? Because there's always a practical element, especially a low budget independent movie. There's always sort of some practical elements that often cross with the artistic.
Absolutely. My lead actress in the film, she definitely wanted to discuss all the dialogue right before we would shoot the scene. And one of the things that I learned on set was it's always great to be open. It's always great to not put a roof on, an artist and the creativity that they're bringing to the table. But it is always important to just the process that I did with this is I always told my actors, the first take is yours, the second is mine. And in that, I allowed every actor to actually give exactly what he or she was truly feeling in the moment, and I always had a backup just in case it wasn't exactly what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. How do you approach screenplay structure? There's sort of the Blake Snyder, Sid Field, where they have a very clear template, midpoints, inciting incidents, act breaks, and that sort of stuff. How do you approach screenplay structure on your scripts?
Blake Snyder. I'm telling you, he's. Actually, I just read Save the Cat this calendar year, and I've always had the Screenwriter's Bible, and I've always kind of just stuck to that because it's that's the 3-act structure that it will just teach you down. But Blake Snyder really, really broke it down to just a little bit more in his book Save the Cat. And for the new screenplay that I'm writing right now, I tried this approach, and I just didn't realize like how much easier the outline was. To spit the outline out whenever if it talks about the midpoints, we always think of the midpoints and we know that something big is changing right here. But Blake Snyder really pointed out to me, he's like, this is one scene. There is like this specific point. There is one scene to it. There's not two, there's not three. And whenever I saw there was a true structure of for each part, how many scenes should be in that part, everything really started making sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. How do you approach genre requirements? And I'm curious, this being sort of a crime drama, action thriller elements. Winter's Bone came to mind when I first saw it. But just how do you approach genre requirements? Did you talk to some distributors and get an idea? Well, would this be a movie that might potentially sell? And then, as I said, these genre requirements, you hear certain things like, you want a tense scene every 10 pages. In a thriller, you want a thrill every 10. In a comedy, you want 3 laughs a page. Just how do you approach some of those types of things? And then maybe we talked about the distribution.
Well, that's kind of that happened on the last film. It was more of just a crime drama, and our distribution threw out the idea that we should probably add some more action into it. It's like this could actually it has the bones to be an action film, but it's not often enough. So I did some research. I read a few action scripts from a few actor friends of mine, and just with my own research online, I realized how to write an action scene, how to write a car chase scene, and how to pace the movie to where we're not sleeping for too long, and action will keep us up throughout the entire event.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay, so once you guys had a draft of the script that you really liked, what were the next steps to actually going out, raising money, and getting this cast attached?
Like I said, the casting process took 4 years. So a lot of it was putting out offers in Hollywood. You send out an offer and you have 2 weeks for the actor to say yes, no, or not even answer at all. So I'm certain that many of them saw Matthew Yerby on this script, and when they looked up the name, they've never seen anything. So I'm sure it was passed along a lot. But I did know that the characters that I did write were very specific. They were Southern, and I wanted to make sure the accent was going to be not. I just knew it had to be authentic. And so it was very, very, we had a lot of thought process going into who's going to play these roles. And by the end of it, I do see why this process takes so long. And it's just casting will take forever. And the moment we got the cast, the money came right behind it.
Okay. So can you talk about that a little bit? That's so there's always this chicken and egg piece in Hollywood where it's sometimes tough to get the cast before you have the money. And so you can't, it sounds like you guys went to the cast first, tried to get the cast, and then went and raised money. But maybe you can talk about that a little bit. How do you incentivize these actors to sign on? Did you give them pay or play deals? Did they just like the material? Did you have someone that knew them? Maybe you can talk about that. How do you get these types of actors attached to your project without having a lot of money?
The first thing is, like, I did forget to mention, we crowdfunded the film in 2017, which gave us a little bit of money, and gotcha. It gave us enough to be able to pay a 10% deposit on all of these actors, and so that we were pitching real offers, and we had enough to just to pay 10% of them, just so they know it was real, and I will say, like, one of the actors, I did reach out to a friend, and that's how we actually got Wayne Perret on my film. He was actually my acting coach, and I reached out to him 2 weeks before we started shooting when we lost another actor. But for the other ones, I do. It's still shocking to say, but they really loved the material. They really liked the role, and they wanted to see it. They said, "I'm if this thing is greenlit, I'm in."
Did you hire a casting director to help with that, or was your producers making the offers to the agents?
Producers. They took care of everything.
So talk about that a little bit. So once you had your cast attached, because we often hear in Hollywood that once you have your cast attached, it's very easy to raise money, which I think is a little bit of a fallacy. Nothing is easy in this business.
No.
But maybe you can talk about that just a little bit. Once you had this cast attached, then what do you actually do to raise the money? It's going back to some of your investors you've already talked to because you have named cast. They're a little more excited about it. But just what does that actually literally mean? Like, who do you go to once you have this cast attached?
Well, once we had the cast attached, we found some reputable sales companies for domestic and international film sales. And when they see the cast, they will pull out their numbers and they will see what every actor is actually worth and what they're worth in the United States and what they're worth internationally. And from there, we were able to our senior producer, Todd Slater, actually put us in contact with some people that were willing to see these numbers and see that we could make some money overseas. So, and through that, we found investors that we didn't know that they were even out there. Mm-hmm. Gotcha, it really was. It's like when the cast came, everything started falling into place.
Gotcha. So just as an actor, I wonder if you can give some tips to screenwriters. Are there some things as an actor that you've noticed that you really like when writers put them in? And then the flip side of that, are there some things you see writers do that maybe as an actor, you're like, maybe you should do less of that, but just maybe from your actor, through your actor lens, are there some tips you can give to screenwriters?
Absolutely. I've learned through many bad screenplays. Don't direct the actor too much with the writing. Like, I've learned to set the scene up and let the actor act. That is their job. It's for them to interpret it. You shouldn't say, I was talking about my mentors, like, you shouldn't say that he turns to the left and coughs. And, like, just to be so specific, we'll put an actor in a box and we'll also put them in their heads. And that's where we see bad acting on TV, is whenever you see an actor in their head. And so being too specific with them, with narrative description and physical movements, it's a lot of times that's just wasting page space, because that's, on the day of shooting, it's whatever that actor feels. And if the shot is absolutely correct for him to do it. So there's so many factors that do go into that. Another thing I would say is that one of the things that I've really seen that's like actors are really, really into is whenever dialogue is just a little different than what the common normal person speaks like. An actor is always attracted to something that's a little bit different. And for example, in the film that I do, the Southern accent, what we do is we leave off the G and INGs a lot. So if it's fixing, it's fixing. And you draw the A instead of an ER. It's, instead of supper, it's supper. And little things like this will attract actors just because they know this is something different.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's sound advice. Can we just talk briefly about your move to LA? It sounds like you're in Venice now, so you're living in California. At what point did you make it out here? And maybe you can talk about that transition. Any advice you have for people that are looking to make a similar move?
Absolutely. I realized that whenever I was in New Orleans and everything started moving to Atlanta, Georgia, that the industry was not going to have the same amount of auditions and or the same opportunities for me to actually become a writer director. I knew that there wasn't a lot of producers and also not a lot of people that invest in films outside of Los Angeles. And so my friends had moved out there the year before. Andrew Vogel, who's the person that produced the film, and I I went out there. I visited my friends for a week. I took a few meetings while I was there. I had a script that I was kind of marketing at the time, and I met a few producers, and they said, if I were you, I would move home and I would come back out here. And I I did exactly what they said. Whether it was perfect for that moment or not, I know that the hardest part is leaving. And I can tell anybody that it's big, it's scary, and that's the only thing in your mind is like I'm a big fish here, but I'm going to be a tiny fish there, and it's so expensive. It's all these things, but one of the things that I've really learned is like to be a filmmaker, you have to be a hustler, and there's not a better place than Los Angeles, California, that will teach you how to do that.
Yeah. So how did you happen to end up in Venice? And is that where you would recommend if someone just asked you, hey, I'm moving to LA, where should I end up? Is Venice someplace you would recommend?
I would say Venice should be a further stop. My first place I lived out there was North Hollywood, and
That's
it's
mine
North
too.
Hollywood
Is
is
yeah. I moved
yeah,
in North Hollywood too. It's a little cheaper. If people don't know
it's
LA,
cheap.
the
It's
valley's
cheap,
much
and there's a
cheaper.
lot of artists. There's a lot of
Yeah.
artists there that are just they're out there trying to make something, and so
Mhm.
there's a ton of short films going on out there. There, like
Mhm.
that's a great place to actually get a start. Is just to be in North Hollywood because I think there's a different short film every day out there.
Yeah.
And I do think that was a great first spot. After that, I went to West Hollywood and then Santa Monica, and I'm just landed in Venice.
Yeah, gotcha. So just I like to wrap up these interviews by asking the guests, is there anything you've seen recently that you can recommend to our mostly screenwriting audience? HBO, Netflix, Hulu, anything you're watching that you think maybe deserves a little extra attention?
I recently just rewatched Hell or High Water again, and
Hmm.
it's just such an incredible script. I every time I watch it, I can't walk out of the room. I love how beautifully simple they do it, and even the dialogue is very simple. If you'll watch that movie, there's not big chunks of monologues. Most of their dialogue is one line. It is
Hmm.
one line. They use silence so well, and they know how to bring the intensity up through all the car chases, through the gunfights. I'm telling you, I just think the world of that movie.
Okay, yeah, that's a great recommendation for people that haven't seen that. Definitely check that out. How can people see your movie, The Dirty South? What's the release schedule going to be like for that?
We will be in theaters on November 10th, and we will be on video on demand as well. On November 10th, we have one premiere in Louisiana tomorrow. We have one in Fort Lauderdale, Florida next week, and then we go into the theaters on the 10th.
Gotcha. And what's the best way for people to keep up with what you're doing? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, anything you're comfortable sharing, I will round up for the show notes. People can click over and just follow along with you.
Absolutely. My Instagram is where most people follow me, and it's Matthew Yerby Artist,
Okay.
and that's just that.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll round that up for the show notes. Matthew, good luck with this film. Good luck with your future films as well. I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me.
Absolutely. I do want to tell you one thing before I get off. Like I've actually followed your podcast for about 10 years now.
Oh, really? That's
This is really incredible because
huh.
when I saw the name on it, it's like, this is crazy. It's like, you were one of my first teachers is
Huh.
as far as like how do I write? How do I actually go out to meet people? And I just wanted to tell you, thank you for doing what you're doing.
Hey, well, thank you, Matthew. I really appreciate you taking a moment to call that out. So it's appreciated that people do appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Of course, man.
So good luck, man. We'll talk to you later.
Yes, sir.
SYS's From Concept to Completion screenwriting course is now available. Just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It will take you through every part of writing a screenplay, coming up with a concept, outlining, writing the opening pages, the first act, second act, third act, and then rewriting. And then there's even a module at the end on marketing your screenplay once it's polished and ready to be sent out. We're offering this course in 2 different versions. The first version, you get the course, plus you get 3 analyses from an SYS reader. You'll get 1 analysis on your outline, and then you'll get 2 analyses on your first draft of your screenplay. This is just our introductory price. You're getting 3 full analyses, which is actually the same price as our 3-pack analysis bundle. So you're essentially getting the course for free when you buy the 3 analyses that come with it. And to be clear, you're getting our full analysis with this package. The other version doesn't have the analysis, so you'll have to find some friends or colleagues who will do the feedback portion of the course with you. I'm letting SYS Select members do this version of the course for free. So if you're a member of SYS Select, you already have access to it. You also might consider that as an option. If you join SYS Select, you will get the course as part of that membership too. A big piece of this course is accountability. Once you start the course, you'll get an email every Sunday with that week's assignment. And if you don't complete it, we'll follow up with another reminder the next week. It's easy to pause the course if you need to take some time off, but as long as you're enrolled, you'll continue to get reminders for each section until it's completed. The objective of the course is to get you through it in 6 months so that you have a completed, polished screenplay ready to be sent out. So if you have an idea for a screenplay and you're having a hard time getting it done, this course might be exactly what you need. If this sounds like something you'd like to learn more about, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/screenwriting course. It's all one word, all lowercase. I will, of course, link to the course in the show notes, and I will put a link to the course on the homepage up in the right-hand sidebar. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer-director Mick Davis, who just did a feature thriller with Emil Hirsch called Walden. We talked through this project as well as how he got his start. He originally broke into the business as a writer and eventually started to write and direct. So we talked through how he got some of those first early writing credits and how he was able to make the move into directing as a writer. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. That's the show. Thank you for listening.